Blog Talk Radio.
This is Radio Itahuka, the voice of Rwanda National Congress, broadcasting from Washington, D.C. here in the United States of America. Your host tonight is Dr. Theogene Rudasingwa, and with us tonight we have once again our guest, General Kayumba Nyamwasa. And we normally start our program by sending greetings to our people in Rwanda, our fellow countrymen and women, those in Kigali, Kibungo, Byumba, Ruhengeri, Gisenyi, Kibuye, Butare, Gitarama, Gikongoro, Cyangugu. We also send our warmest greetings to our colleagues and compatriots who are now incarcerated in the prisons of Kigali and elsewhere. And we also greet those people who are now in Eastern Congo, as well as people who are in Arusha. We also send our greetings to our fellow countrymen and women who are in refugee camps across Africa and elsewhere. And of course, we send our greetings to our fellow countrymen and women in Europe, in Canada, and here in the United States. Welcome to our program, dear listeners. And first of all, we wish to welcome our dear guest, General Nyamwasa. How are you doing today, sir?
Thank you, Dr. Rudasingwa. How are you doing?
We are doing very fine. First of all, I must report that your appearance last night has attracted a lot of attention, and there were several listeners across the world, and particularly in Rwanda. And this is a treat that you've had another time, especially since it's very early in the morning in South Africa, to appear here and continue this conversation, but especially in English. So welcome to the program once again, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Of course, here in South Africa, these are very, very unholy hours of the morning. But I thank you so much for hosting me, and for the hard work you are doing. Thank you so much.
Being a soldier, I'm sure you do not exactly hate operating in godly hours, right?
Well, you are right. You know, these are the times we used to operate, I remember very well, in 1991 in the Virunga Mountains. But, you know, it's quite a while now, and I've grown older since that time. But in any case, we had a cause to fight for, and there is no problem. Anytime, any day you want me to come on the show, I'll be available. Thank
you. Now, one of the things that I was reminded about, and I was a bit ashamed about that, is that last night I should have asked you how you're doing, and so many people have asked me to ask you that since you came, you had a near-death experience in 2010, they asked me to ask you how you are actually doing.
Well, I'm doing quite well. Well, of course, 2010 was a very nasty year. You very well know what happened. But otherwise, you know, I got injured. But at the same time, you know, you and me and very many others of our compatriots know that it could have been worse. And we have seen worse situations. But in the circumstances, I'm fine. I'm doing very well. And I believe it can only get better. Thank you.
Well, there are some listeners here in the not exactly familiar with the situation in Africa or even in Rwanda in particular, except for the bad news about genocide and other things. And the other thing that they came to know is this mystical general who during World Cup nearly died because of what is believed to have been an assassination attempt. And so many people have wondered who could have wanted to kill you and what could have been his motive.
Doctor, last night somehow I did talk a lot and I never gave enough opportunity for interaction on the show. And today I try very much to restrict myself maybe to questions so that we can be able to give more time to the callers. But to answer to your question, well, in 1910, maybe I believe in the month of April, President Kagame went to Parliament and he was asked a question in reference to me and Patrick Karegeya. And in his response, he said that if it requires him to kill flies by using a hammer, he'll do it and he'll do it soon. And that was in reference to me and Colonel Patrick Karegeya. A month and a half after, I got shot by an individual who actually attacked me when I was with my wife. And he shot at me. And during the scuffle, I could see he was not interested in getting anything either from the car or from me or from my wife. And I could see the intention of the individual was indeed to kill me. And since then, investigations have taken place. A lot of conversations and a lot of interviews have taken place, including the recent one which was taken by President Kagame in Kampala, when he said that the case in South Africa will die a natural death. You can imagine a leader who talks about the possible killing of a national and particularly person who was his Army Chief of Staff, his ambassador, and all he's concerned about is that the case will die a natural death. So I leave it to the viewers and the listeners to make their own conclusion, given those circumstances under which we were attacked and the responses that have been given by President Kagame, for them to make a conclusion. I have no doubt in my mind that the killing was not intended as a robbery, and I also know that it could not have been some misplaced identity. It was budgeted, and definitely somebody was behind it. But given the situation under which we've been living, and the media, the way it has played out itself, who else would have been interested in my assassination? Obviously, it can't be the government of Cambodia. It cannot be the government of Nicaragua. It is an open secret who was involved. But since the case is going on in the court of law, I would just want to make those references that I have given you for our listeners to make their own conclusion.
Thank you. And briefly, how does the court case stand right now?
Well, there were two cases going on. One was the attempted murder, which is the principal case. Then there was the case, the second case was the conspiracy to murder case. In the second case, which is the conspiracy to murder, this has been suspended from the court because the two witnesses who were the principal witnesses found hostile, and the prosecutor could not continue with the case. However, the case was not thrown out of court. It has just only been suspended, so that in the future, if new elements were to appear, the suspect still would be apprehended, and then the case would go on. It so happens that a number of suspects appear in both cases, and so the first case now has been going on. Last week we had a session for a whole week, and the arresting officers were the ones who were giving testimonies, and we believe that we shall be resuming again on the 19th of next month. Well, I cannot be able to speculate. The case is still in court sub judice. I will not wish to divulge into the details of what I have heard and maybe what I know. We can only wait and see what happens. And I believe justice will be delivered.
Yes, we all hope that justice will be delivered, and that is the sentiment that many Rwandans across the ethnic divide, many foreigners are interested in, and certainly as Rwandans we wish that justice will be done. Well, let's now move into the next phase of the substantive issues of tonight. First of all, even looking at the fact that you almost lost life, and suspiciously or most likely at the hands of people who were one time your colleagues in the same struggle. You are at the forefront of the Rwandese Patriotic Front in the struggle from Uganda, in which you also participated. You participated in the Ugandan struggle itself, and you saw Kagame's rise to power. Then you fell out with him and fled to South Africa, and the story that you just narrated is part of the sad commentary of our country. But there are some people who say, oh well, these are simply squabbles at the top between the ruling elite. Kagame and Kayumba are friends, and maybe we shouldn't even bother to get involved in it because these are squabbles amongst people at the top. How did you fall out, and why did you fall out with Kagame?
Essentially, I'm not the first person that President Kagame has betrayed. You are one of those that worked very close to him. You are his ambassador, you are his director of cabinet, and you worked very closely with him, just like I did, and very many others. Since the beginning of our struggle, since the beginning of the war, there has been a lot of occurrences in the history of the RPF whereby a lot of individuals who had put their lives in the line have been betrayed by the leader whom they had put their faith into, and particularly we thought that we were building a nation that will be based on the rule of law, and we thought there would always be respect for human rights, and we believed that we were going to change the Rwanda that we thought had been ruled over a number of years and had been ruled by dictatorial regimes, and we thought we were going to establish a democracy. To our surprise, until today, Rwanda is even worse than when we started the war. And I happen to have been one of those who thought that maybe we should change course and try to build a nation that is much more built on the aspirations of the Rwandan people, But unfortunately, since 1998, or maybe slightly before, Rwanda degenerated into a one-party state, and a complete dictatorship where institutions of government were monopolized by an individual, and particularly the security organs have been compromised, and the officers of government have been treated almost like slaves. And I disagreed with him. I advised him a number of times that we should change course, and if we don't, we are not be different from the people we had fought against. However, my advice was construed to mean maybe dissent. And in Rwanda, when you are during Kagame's regime, when you were considered to be dissenting or to be having a different view, you are immediately categorized as an enemy. And since 2000 or maybe slightly after, I was treated as an enemy, and there was a deliberate campaign by the RPF using a number of cadres, going to the villages, meeting all other officers, and telling them how bad I am, and how I should be isolated, and all those kind of things that have happened to a lot of my compatriots. So there is no difference. There are no personal differences between me and Kagame. Where you said he was my friend, I'm not very, very sure about that, because I don't know who is Kagame's friend. But to some extent, yes, at one point in time, he acted as if he was my friend. I wouldn't want to go into details as of how, but we had some kind of family relations at that material time, visiting each other and very many other things. And people construed that and to mean probably friendship. However, I think he was doing it specifically to create an impression, probably to manipulate, and use me from his personal end. And this has not only happened to me alone, it has happened to very many others, including yourself, and very many others now in exile, and those who are isolated and are in oblivion in Rwanda. Look at the founder members of the RPF, look at the original commanders of the RPA, and all those who put their lives on the line. The majority of them cannot now be traced, and that's extremely sad. At the same time, there are some of our friends who were in the opposition during Habyarimana's regime, and who had been part of the transitional government. All of them are now out of the country. They ran away. While we thought we were going to build a government of consensus, a government of national unity, where we would think that we could be able to tolerate each other and build a Rwanda that is based on understanding, on toleration, on resolving the differences that have persisted in Rwanda. Today, Rwanda is a hard line. It's a one-party state. It's a dictatorship. People live in fear, and that's what you have. So essentially, the differences between me and Kagame are not personal. They are much more national. And you definitely know I was not recruited as a professional soldier. We set out to go and see the situation in Rwanda, and we had objectives that we were supposed to meet. When those objectives were not met, the only way was to indicate that I cannot continue to be part of a system that was diverting from the original objectives of the RPF, for which we sacrificed so much. And that's where we fell off with Kagame. And since then, well, he's never hidden his intention, and his intention is indeed to liquidate me and very many others.
Well, in 2010, you were a leading member a leading founder of, together with others, with your colleagues and other people whom you found in exile, to establish the Rwanda National Congress. What do you hope to accomplish, and what are really the chances of success, especially against a background where Kagame and company keep on saying that Rwanda is devolved, and there are many Rwandans who have been deceived into believing that Kagame is invincible since he has an army, he has a strong RPF, and he keeps on boasting about it. And of course, there are some in the international community who also mentioned that he has developed the country, and therefore on that basis is a strong leader, and that the chances of the likes of Rwanda National Congress to succeed are indeed very slim. What would you say about that?
Well, we appreciate that Rwanda has developed since 1994. Well, that's a fact. And in many cases, Rwanda had been developing even since 1959. Actually, when you look at the statistics, it is indicative that in the 1980s, Rwanda was developing much more than its neighbors. And that was a result of the fact that Congo, of course, was in shambles. Uganda was at war. Maybe Tanzania was finding its bearing. So the development of Rwanda has not started with Kagame, and I believe it will not end with him. Secondly, even countries which are developing rapidly, they change their leaders, and countries do not have to go under dictatorship for them to develop. Even countries that have even developed more than Rwanda, when the leaders that are at the helm of power, people think they are not fulfilling the fundamental principles of a human being, and that's mainly the principles of liberty and freedom. Leaders have been thrown out. I will give you an example of Tunisia. I do not think that Rwanda developed more than Tunisia from 1994 up to 2010. And yet the Tunisians threw out President Ben Ali. It's simply because there was something else beyond development, and that is freedom and liberty. There is no way when we talk about development. Development is not about buildings. It's not about roads. It's not about very clean streets. It's about what goes on in the hearts and minds of the people. People do not go to bed and feel very happy simply because the streets are clean, when there is fear in their hearts. People will not talk about development when their compatriots are running into exile. People will not feel that they are developing when a leader is registering 95 to 93% in a rigged election. When people are defranchised, don't expect them to talk about development. So we agree that Rwanda has developed, just like it has always developed over the years, and just like very many other countries have developed. We also concede that there is stability in Rwanda, and that is also a catalyst for development. But that stability is not based on what Kagame as an individual has done. There are very many Rwandans, including yourself and others, who participated and have also contributed to the stability of that country. And that should not be attributed to an individual. It should be attributed to the Rwandan people and all those who go out sacrifice to make it possible for the country to develop. And then when you talk about an army, a very, very strong army, I do not think that Kagame has got a stronger army than the army of Egypt, which Mubarak had, or even that one of Libya under President Gaddafi. But the people stood up when they got fed up with those leaders, and they threw them out, and the army was standing by. I can assure you that the army in Rwanda is so disgruntled that they would have wanted to see Kagame out yesterday. they can be having him for the time being, just like the army in Libya could tolerate Gaddafi for a number of decades. But when time came, they stood by and the revolutionary forces took out Gaddafi. In Rwanda, the army is living under bribery, under manipulation, and threats. But during elections, also before elections, Kagame makes a lot of massive promotions as a way of buying loyalty, pays out money to be able to soothe the hearts of those who are not happy. And I understand, particularly when the RNC was born, he has been giving out a lot of concessions, including a lot of concessions, particularly to the Republican Guard, the force that guards it. This is a force of about 3,000 troops guarding one man, and an ordinary soldier in that army earned more than a colonel. And I understand, since he started this radio, he has since dished out vehicles to military officers as a way of compromising them. But those inducements also have their own limits, because I know the officers and soldiers know that these things are not personal, they don't belong to him, they belong to the state. Even when he issues them, it does not suit their mind and does not give them the liberty and the freedom they need. And they also know that what they fought for has been betrayed. So this the strong army they talk about is not a very big issue. When the forces of liberation come about, he will go, because even the government he repressed also had a strong army. But we were able to defeat it because they had a cause. And I believe even today the causes are there, and I believe still can go throw him out. As regards the RNC, the RNC was established with colleagues, and the main objective is mainly to re-establish liberty and freedom for our people, dignity, and try and make sure that Rwandans can live harmoniously in a spirit of tolerance and forgiveness. And this work has been lacking in Rwanda.
Very good. I think we've come halfway in this conversation. I think to do justice to now over 30 callers who are gathered here, I think we shall start taking questions. And once again, because we, as you can see, we are short of time, and we appreciate all your interest. So to do justice to each other, try to mention your name, be very brief, and certainly General Kayumba will also be brief in his responses so that he can cover as many questions as possible. And I can see that in the lineup, there is somebody whose number ends with 9387. 9387. Would you like to ask a question?
General Kayumba, for your service to the country. My question is, can you give us 3 initial course of action that you would take to bring Rwanda on the path of true democracy if you are the leader of Rwanda? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Essentially, I'm not striving to be the leader of Rwanda. I happen to be a member of the RNC, and the RNC is a democratic organization. The rebels choose their own leaders. What I can say is that what would the RNC do if they were to take over power in Rwanda, not what Kagame would do if he was to be a leader in Rwanda. One, I think the first one is to give our people peace and stability. Today, Rwanda may be secure, but it is not peaceful. And the peace is the point that we as Rwandans need. You can be secure because there are a lot of soldiers, a lot of policemen, but you are not peaceful. And Rwanda is not peaceful. The second thing is that people should be given the liberty to choose their leaders and hold them accountable. Today, Rwanda has an unaccountable leader, and they uses security organs which are also only accountable to him, but who act with impunity, and that must change. The third, you asked me for the third thing which I think is very pertinent, is the issue of reconciliation and unity. We need unity and reconciliation, and we need genuine unity and genuine reconciliation, not enforced unity and manipulated unity and manipulated reconciliation. Thank you.
Well, we have another caller whose number I think ends with the second caller. I think his number ends with 6021. 6021. Are you there? Six 6021. Are you there? Maybe as we wait for other callers, because I can see they are not picking, maybe you might wish to elaborate, General Kayumba, a little more on that aspect of enforced or manipulated reconciliation and manipulated unity.
Thank you, Dr. Dosingwa. What I was referring to when I talked about manipulated unity and reconciliation, this is much more embedded in we have a policy in Rwanda, and we've got a commission of unity and reconciliation. This one was born out of the Arusha Peace Agreement because it was recognized that Rwanda had problems and our society was fractured. And we thought we should have unity and reconciliation. Since 1994, and since the commission was put in place, reconciliation and unity have always been manipulated by the state. And I would give you an example of the genocide law. An individual would probably be suspected to have committed genocide, and maybe would be put on the list, and his name sent to Interpol and other places where this particular person should be arrested and be tried. But if the government of Rwanda, and particularly the RPF, need to use him, they will call him and inform him that the charges have been dropped without going to court. And in due course, at the same time, they have got other people who are being imprisoned, and the charges are either genocide denial, genocide or revisionism, including people like Ingabire. Now, one would wonder why somebody who has been suspected of having committed heinous acts could be brought in, just be forgiven by the political authority without going through a court of law. And yet somebody who has never been known to have committed any crime at all is put in prison and is being charged for crimes he has never committed. Now, this brings in a very, very big problem. The second thing is rigging of elections. When you rig elections, that means people out there would want to fight the regime and throw it out. In the process, there's always competing and conflicting attitudes. And you have created a potentiality for conflict. in that case, you cannot talk about genuine reconciliation when you are rigging elections, because you are actually sowing seeds of conflict. The third element is monopolization of institutions of government. When you've got a judiciary which is not independent at all, what you will get is that people who feel they cannot get justice in the country, they opt to run out and go into exile, including yourself and me. For example, if the judicial system in Rwanda was functioning well, I would have stayed in Rwanda and fought whatever allegations that they were in court instead of going into exile. So you cannot talk about a situation of unity and reconciliation when you are having a host of your own citizens running out of the country. Then you cannot talk about unity because people are always scared and running out of the country. Then the army and the police, as long as the army and the police are partisan, they are not national. They are when they are partisan, that would mean they work in the interest of the party. And in the case of Rwanda, they actually work in the interest of the president to hunt down his perceived enemies. In that regard, people will always live in a state of fear, and you cannot reconcile with somebody who fears you. You can only reconcile with somebody with whom you engage. So essentially, what we hear in Rwanda about unity and reconciliation, it's actually a farce. We have got people who are terrorized, who pretend to have reconciled between themselves, and yet they are waiting for an opportunity, either to throw out the regime and throw even pounce on their neighbors.
Good. We have a caller whose number ends with 1612. 1612. Okay. Caller whose number ends with 0455.
Yes, this is Michel calling from Arizona.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, General Kayumba. I really appreciate that you take time to listen to Rwandans and address their concerns through RNC Radio Itahuka. I have a question. There is a myth that has been built around Kagame, that Kagame stopped the genocide, Kagame is not corrupt like other leaders, Kagame has developed Rwanda, Kagame is a hero, and so on. But I'm not convinced and believe that this is a false myth or a big lie. General Kayumba, what can you tell us about this myth built around Kagame?
Thank you, Michel. First and foremost, I believe stopping genocide was not a one-man show. The Rwandan genocide was a concerted effort of very many Rwandese. Actually, those who strived so much to stop the genocide probably died during the process of stopping it. Our heroes are not those who go around singing about themselves. Probably the heroes are those who never survived the war and who never survived even the stopping of the genocide itself. So when one goes out to say Kagame stopped the genocide, where was the RPA? Where was the RPF? I would appreciate if, for example, people say the RPA stopped the genocide, the RPF stopped the genocide. And that would be a collective credit. But when somebody goes out to steal credit for what was done by tens of thousands of people and wants to call it his own, that's where the problem lies. That's number one. Number two, when you talk about Kagame being categorized as an incorruptible leader, indeed you call it a myth. It is a myth indeed. I believe Kagame is a very corrupt leader, very wasteful, and he has stolen from the state more than any other leader Rwanda has ever had. And there is everything to show, there is evidence to that effect. One, the private sector in Rwanda today cannot be able to operate and not operate efficiently because Kagame has put up a lot of proxy companies under the umbrella originally of Pricecar and Crystal Ventures, and they monopolize all areas of economic life in Rwanda, and the rest of the private people and private enterprises have been corrupt. And the same party which allegedly owns those parties, have you ever had a country where there is a political party and there is no national treasurer? The RPF last had a treasurer in 1996 or 1998, if I remember, when Arozia Nyumba was the treasurer of the RPF. Since then, even in the elections, however sham they are in RPF, they elect other members of other commissions, either mobilization, women, youth, ABCD, but they will never have a treasurer. And that shows you that the president, who is also the chairman of the RPF, is also the treasurer of the party. And one wonders, a country like Rwanda, where most of those conglomerates are owned by the individual who happens to be the president, and you say he's not corrupt, I don't think that's a fair judgment. But of course, maybe before the RNC started, there was a huge campaign funded by the government of Rwanda, and of course, money also given to a lot of PR companies in Europe and America to create an image of Paul Kagame as an incorruptible leader. But we also know in Rwanda, he's a very unaccountable leader, and indeed very, very corrupt. So this one I can attest to, because he bought aircraft using government money, which he actually rents out himself. He owns properties out of the country, which he rents to the country. Now, if you want to talk about corruption, and you cannot be able to account for what you own, and you rent out personal properties to the government, if you are not corrupt, then what can you be? So it is indeed a myth for anybody to say that Kagame is incorruptible. That is a very big myth. As far as genocide is concerned, maybe it should always be said that the RPF, the RPA stopped genocide instead of monopolizing what was done by organization and call it personal. Thank you.
Somebody with the number ending with 5502. 5502.
I'm Justin Movaneza calling from Houston, Texas.
How are you, sir?
Oh, how are you today, doctor? I'm fine, thank you. And thank you so much for having me today.
Go ahead and ask General Kayumba.
Okay. Kayumba, do you like to be called General or Mister? Can I call you Mister?
Whichever you want, whatever you find is easier for you, I don't mind.
Thank you so much. And I'm glad you talked about the reconciliation in Rwanda. It's a fake reconciliation. It's, as you say, it's manipulated. And then there is no way we can talk of reconciliation while one group, ethnic group, is oppressing another one. Now, tell me, as one of the founders of Rwanda National Congress, how do you plan to help Rwandan people to reconcile each other? Now, my second question was, do you feel guilty of what you and RPF soldiers did to Hutus? If so, are you ready to ask for forgiveness? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. First of all, in response to your first question, in Rwanda, there is no one ethnic group oppressing the other. Last night in my presentation, I was categoric and I indicated that there is no ethnic group in Rwanda, and the leadership in Rwanda does not represent an ethnic group. The leadership in Rwanda represents itself. And I believe this is where Rwandans have always gone wrong. In 1994, some of the Rwandans, and the majority of them, went out to go and kill their compatriots in the name of wanting to safeguard the interests of the so-called another group. And to be very categoric, some Hutus went out and killed the Tutsis, thinking that they are trying to protect the interests of the Hutu community, and that was wrong. So even today, in Rwanda, you cannot talk about leadership of the Tutsis. The Tutsis in Rwanda are not in power. Kagame is in power. Kagame is the dictator, and he uses national institutions to oppress Rwandans. It's not only the Bahutu who are oppressed. Even the Batutsis are oppressed. Rudasingwa is not a Muhutu, Gahima is not a Muhutu, and very many others who have run out of the country. These are not the Hutu. But it is a regime which is dictatorial, a regime which has degenerated, is unaccountable, and is involved in impunity. And you must always be able to discern the leader from the population. You cannot say when Kagame is flying his stone bombardiers that he flies with all the Tutsis in those airports. And also, we must recognize that even when the going becomes bad, Kagame is not going to run away with all the Tutsis. That's not the situation. So it's quite important to understand that in Rwanda today, the oppression is not one ethnic group oppressing the other. The situation is that there is a leadership that is oppressing the Rwandese people, and that is Tutsis, the Twas, and the Bahutu. So it's quite important people should understand the difference between leadership and ethnic groups. Secondly, you asked me if I feel guilty of being part of the RPF and the death that occurred to the Bahutu communities. Well, during the war, a number of Bahutu died during the war, and indeed it is very regrettable. If you have got your country at heart and you know people died during the war, definitely you cannot be happy unless you are not human. But you must understand the circumstances under which you are operating, and I believe in any case that we never had the war in the first place, so that people had to die. So at a personal level, I definitely regret what happened, and I believe and I wish it had not happened. But at the same time, we must also appreciate that during the war, there's not only the Hutu who died, actually the Tutsis died many more. You know very well the genocide claimed probably 800,000, maybe a million. I believe those are the figures that are given. I think anybody in Rwanda, whether you were a soldier, whether you're not a soldier, you cannot be happy that your compatriot dies in a situation that were taking place in Rwanda. So to be very categorical and direct, oh yes, we regret the death of all the Rwandans that could have died during the war. And we believe part of the reconciliation that should take place is to genuinely discuss and look at what took place and see how some of those things will never happen again. Thank you so much.
Thank you. One other question that was texted by somebody is related to what was asked earlier, which might be a myth as well, because somebody say that Kagame is a stabilizing factor in the Great Lakes region. What do you have to say about that?
Well, that one is a given. It's the fact. Well, he has gone to war with Uganda. He's going to war with the Congo. He's continuing threatening many of his neighbors. You look at his diplomatic engagements with the other countries, not only those ones in the neighborhood, because that also has got an impact among his neighbors. It is true Kagame is a destabilizing factor in the sense that when Rwanda is potentially violent like it is today, because I don't see Kagame getting out of power peacefully. Obviously, the neighbors are likely to fear the pinch of that fallout. And it's always, every other day, lots of refugees run out of Rwanda to Uganda, to Tanzania. And people do not want to see refugees in their own countries. And of course, that is stabilizing. Another issue is that you remember last year when Kagame was talking about banning Nyakatsi in reference to his neighbors. Of course, that was a veiled way of almost wanting to say that he can declare war on his neighbors. Well, today there are some cosmetic kind of overtures in the region, but they know that's not the first time that he has made overtures to his neighbors and turned out and either killed some or even attacked others. So in which case his temperament, the way he works, is very destabilizing. Secondly, he has kept a stature in that every other day people think that either he's attacking Congo or he's moving in to go and attack the so-called FDLR. But that has got a very, very big impact on the people of Congo, the civilians, the population of Congo. Any war in the Congo, of course, will result in the displacement of people and, of course, death. So every other day, I believe the Congolese expect Rwanda to attack, to occupy, and probably displace its own citizens. Since 1996, Rwanda has been involved in Congo. It's a common secret. And this has not been stabilizing the country at all. So essentially, unless a country is stable and peaceful within its own borders, it potentially becomes a threat and a destabilizing factor in the neighborhood. And Rwanda and Kagame in particular happens to have that kind of stature.
Thank you. Caller 8051. We have 6 minutes to go, so try to be very brief, and I will request General Kayumba to be very brief so that we can give him some time to conclude this. So go ahead, 8051.
Thank you. Nicholas from Louisville.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes.
General Kayumba, before leaving the country, you were one of the commanding and the powerful leaders in the army, in the RPF army, of course. We have heard about your action and on and off the field in terms of military and leadership skills. But for some reason, you chose to leave the country. For the reason you have been explaining, of course, you decided to leave the country, and later you joined the RNC to raise your voices against the dictatorial regime in Kigali. What message would you give to other officers in RPF who are still being led by a criminal-minded leader such as Paul Kagame? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, for the record, I left them in 2001. That's when I effectively left the RPA. Surprisingly, of course, till 2010, even when they charged me together with my colleagues in Malaysia, they even said I deserted the army. The army that I left in 2001. By the time I left Rwanda, I was an ambassador to India. By the time I left. So, for the record, of course, yes, I left the army in 2001. But you are right. To one point in time, and maybe for quite some time, I wielded some considerable influence in the armed forces. And I had friends in the army. I commanded, I think, all of them now who are in the army, because when I was chief of staff, I was commanding all of them. They are very good officers in the Rwandan army, and some of them are actually politically clear, but the majority of them are very disappointed with what is going on. They feel they are hostages of a regime that has betrayed their cause, and I also know that some of them have also fallen for trivialities, including unprincipled conduct, in order either to obtain promotions, obtain deployments, and money. And that's very unfortunate for any army that sacrificed so much to build a different country, and now they have got a country that is worse than probably what they had, what they replaced, and that's very bad. So my message to them is that you cannot be an officer in a country whereby you are owned by an individual. You must have a conscience and know you are serving a country, you are serving a people. You are not there to serve an individual. There is a difference between a person and a chattel or a property. Sadly, the Rwandan army is treated as a personal property of Paul Kagame. I remember very well when he was talking about my soldiers, my guns, my army, and that was very, very embarrassing. I hate if anybody would call me my general, my soldier. That's terrible. That's very bad enough. All I know is that this is going to go on for quite a while, and simply because the government functions very mysteriously, and I do not expect officers to go out and revolt. And you know, this has taken place in very many countries where dictators have taken a very long time loading it over the people and the armies. But I also know that the Rwandan army, the Rwandan soldiers are dissatisfied with the situation the way it is in Rwanda. But they are held hostages. I told you that Kagame has a guard unit of about 3,000 troops guarding one man.
You have 30 seconds to go, sir. 30 seconds.
Come again?
You have 30 seconds to go.
Oh, sorry. So I don't know. Maybe to conclude, I will want to conclude by saying that where the Rwandan army is people who are not happy, who know they are being cheated and they have been betrayed, and their cause has gone to the dogs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, General Kayumba. Thank you, listeners. We'll come to the end of our program this evening. We shall continue with our programs, and General Kayumba, we wish you quick recovery, and you've been given another lease of life, and we all believe it's for a purpose, and I'm sure we are going to succeed in whatever we are trying to do. Thank you so much, and have a nice morning.
Thank you, Dr. Tojen, and thank you for everything you are doing.